ready to go. We probably have a few other people to join us this morning. So again, you're all very welcome. And time for me to introduce myself. Catherine Corcoran's the name. I work in the Technological University of the Shannon. But I also spent a good few years of my life working in Africa. So some of the comments that I have today are very African specific. So hopefully that's okay for people. And I look forward to hearing from my African colleagues in terms of their perspectives on things. So I wanted to give a little bit of context in terms of the Development Studies Association of Ireland. Every year we have a conference and a summer school, or this year an autumn school, on a theme that we think is very relevant for development, involving, the Global South as well as Ireland's relationship with the Global South. So as you all know, since you signed up, our theme this year is Indigenous Knowledge and Practice, an optimistic response to the global funding crisis, ? So just a bit of context for us now. You all know this stuff, but I just wanted to frame it. If we take the biggest donor in the landscape, USAID, up to now, before, of course, it was disbanded, it was established in 1961 by John F. Kennedy to promote economic development, improve living standards, and foster stability in developing countries. This also was in the context, of course, of attempting to curb the influence of the USSR in the Global South in the midst of the Cold War, of course. So in a similar vein, we're familiar with the major donor entities, such as the World Bank, the other UN organizations, OFDA, the EU, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, major players for decades. And in fact, going to the OECD, ODA reached its peak just 2 years ago in 2023. So we had this landscape, I suppose, of development funding, development cooperation, etc. since the 1960s. Now we know we're in a huge period of change. And according again to the OECD, global aid faces a 9 to 17% drop, or 25 billion in terms of funding drops from 2025. And this, of course, has come as a huge shock to us all, all of us involved in development over the last number of years, whether we're development practitioners or academics. But going back to an age-old debate, and leaving aside the delivery of vital humanitarian aid in a crisis-ridden world, maybe we need to come back to the age-old question of what constitutes development. And that's probably why we're here today, because we're interested in these things. So if we go back, I suppose, to the critical school of development studies, or what used to be called dependency theory in the 70s. Development, what is it? Well, according to the critics, development ultimately means growth in GDP. So we can have all the other kind of nice measures of, mortality, falls in, the mortality rate, education rates, etc. But really, when it comes down to it, the critics would say you're really talking about growth in GDP. And when the major donors mentioned above unleashed development onto the world, it was hailed as a new type of religion, and that the purpose of life was growth, crudely. And all traditional systems, wherever they might be in the world, traditional practices and the very environment itself were to be harnessed in the pursuit of this new goal of development. And the critical viewpoint reveals that although it has a relatively recent history, i.e. 1960s, Development has featured most prominently within all past attempts by the West to dominate non-Western societies. If we go back again to the 70s, Gunther Frank, Wallerstein, looking particularly at Latin America, development was seen as exploitation. So development not equaling growth, but exploitation. Okay, so these are some of the big debates. And as we know, going back then to measuring development, how can we do that? So, for example, according to UNCTAD, 32 of the 44 so-called least developed countries are in Africa. Now, the reasons for this are complex, i.e. definition of development for a start. But then, according to analysts such as Bailey or Deng or Cohn looking at Africa, they would maintain, and this is back to our theme today, that Africa's continued marginalization and underdevelopment has been historically driven by a system of knowledge or a westernized framing that keeps the continent on the world's periphery. So, what a critical point of view would say is that development has been imposed from the West using a set of Western matrices, measurements, and meanings. This is mainly because conventional Western understandings of development offer no more than a single homogeneous process, traceable to a unilinear causal principle, i.e. back to our growth. So in such a context, Africa falls short on many development matrices. Now, forgive me, as I said, my references are to Africa today. Obviously, we'll be talking about many other places in the global south today. Okay, so back to our challenge then. Indigenous knowledge and practice, an optimistic response to the global funding crisis, question mark, is another type of development possible. So in attempting to develop Africa, Carmen states that there has been a crisis and a culture of intellectual dependence and the attendant limitations of indigenous knowledge production on the continent. That is to say, that rigorous African analysis, perspectives, and understandings have not been deployed in explaining and resolving some of the crises that face the continent. They would say that to engender development in Africa, efforts must be made to retrieve the continent's heritage and traditions of the past. And this is where indigenous knowledge systems may be brought to bear. So maybe a definition, and I'm sure we'll hear lots of definitions today. So indigenous knowledge is defined by the International Association of Human Geography as knowledge which is spatially and culturally context specific, collective, holistic, and adaptive. It stresses local people's own agency, their own definitions of development, the importance of building social capital and networks in order to counter the forces of globalization, privatization, and economic restructuring. That's Chuck Smith talking about that. So just to finish, I found this proverb. They often say, "Oh, an African proverb." You know, Africa, as if it's one country, as we all know the critique. But a proverb from somewhere says that sleeping on another's mat is like sleeping on the ground. So the analogy here underlines the fact that any development model uncritically borrowed or imposed from outside can never develop a country, much less a continent. Okay, so that's just to put maybe my context on things here, just to get us started. Is that okay? So we'll have a chance for interaction after each of the speakers today. And just before I introduce Paul and the panel that Paul has assembled, Paul Murphy, I just want you to think after each presentation, because we'll have a little discussion after each presentation. And I have two questions for everybody. First of all, from what you've heard, and we'll talk about this after Paul's and the panel's discussion. First of all, what did you learn or take from what you've heard? Okay, what did you learn or take from what you've heard? And then secondly, what relevance might what you've heard have for your own research or whatever you're engaged in at the moment? Is that okay? Okay, so Paul, can I introduce you in the panel, and we can get going with our first presentation, yeah? So I hope I have all this right. So Paul moderates the DSAI panel, our panel for the World Bank and G20 policy collaboration, and the focus being the Africa Digital Economy Summit as part of the UNESCO's International Decade for Indigenous Languages. And Paul and his group will talk about Ireland's role in securing the future of Indigenous languages, digital tools for preservation and participation. And I think your panel with you is Martha. I don't know if Martha's here.
I'm going to probably have to have her on my phone through my microphone because she's not able to log into Teams. So
Okay,
we'll try
we'll
something
work on
new.
that. Yeah, so I mean, very exciting. She's coming. Martha Anemone is joining us from the Protestant University of Central Africa. Then we have Arvinder Singh, who, yeah, great, from the Digital Economist. Olageson Olsegun is here, I think, was, yes. From the Royal Irish Academy. Core Top, Paul, I don't know if Core
Yeah,
is with us.
he's not, and it's about 1 o'clock in the morning in
Ah,
Western Canada. So I'm hoping
that's
he'll
okay.
join as we get to him.
Great. And then Daniel Gabunge is here as well, I think. Yes, super. Okay, so Paul, I don't know if that was a correct introduction, but you can, I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So I am going to share my screen. We can. Is it showing my screen?
Yep.
Wonderful. Yeah, so it's great to be here and participate with this autumn school. And as Catherine mentioned, my name is Paul Murphy. I'm a doctoral student at TCD. I'm also a fellow with our vendor in the Digital Economist. And the focus here really is going to be looking at the framework for UNESCO's International Decade for Indigenous Languages and put that in the context of the enormous technological changes we are experiencing along with geopolitical, and try and understand that when we talk about languages, it's more than just words. These are infrastructures for memory, identity, and governance. And if we don't find a way as a group to understand how digital tools are writing those infrastructures, we're going to be left behind. So I want us to begin in thinking about these new frontiers of languages and technologies in the context of work group started in October 2023 with the Data Spheres Initiative. And I was on a board for an initiative called Africa Forum on Data Regulatory Sandboxes. We were looking at how data across the African Union in health, finance, climate, and in AI were going to be developed. And the convergences of these questions on issues of sovereignty, about who owns the data, who controls knowledge, and who survives under these new regimes of control is essential in understanding also language. Technology has become so perverse. We can really think of cyborg anthropology, you know, in the realms of Elon Musk's Neuralink, where AI, health data, and biotech are reshaping not only governance, but life itself. So we need to think about how initiative like this with the Africa CDC and upcoming CRISPR research, that if we don't think of biodiversity and linguistic diversity as intertwined, because languages are like genetic codes, repositories of traditional language vital for adaptation and resilience. So technically, this is an example here of how the health data and innovation sandbox was going to be run with the goal of keeping costs as low as possible while putting cross-border interoperability and content standards at a premium. So one of the main ways that can be achieved is through open source digital public goods, including software and content, such as this open HIM platform. And this, in principle, allows you to have lower costs for these low resourced languages. There's a real precedence in the political economy of open source, and I'll talk about one civil servant in British Columbia, which is a small jurisdiction in Western Canada, that in creating an open source for what was a digital road atlas, in the budgeting, it was required that all of the work done would be licensed using open source. So it was going to license around 25,000 different road objects across the province. And it was going to, by including this in the bid, avoiding contractor lock-in. So you can pretty much find this code in anyone who has used an online map has in one way or another used this GEOS system. And this principle, when you're looking at contracting for platforms, can be found in pretty much everything we use, from electronic computing that was produced by the US Army, integrated circuits that was developed by the Air Force, internet routers was with DARPA, the internet protocol of www was developed in CERN. Any graphic browsing that you see on the internet was with the University of Illinois, and GIS was with the US Army Corps of Engineers. So the point is that when government employees begin developing these things, they don't have to make this public knowledge and open source. So you have the ability as a government to shape digital infrastructure for generations to come without having very much money. So from Ireland's point of view, because we need to bring this back to here, if we're looking at language infrastructure and language as a battleground, of the founders of the Republic, and Eamon de Valera, who was the leader of the 1916 Rising, leader of Sinn Féin in the victory in 1918, and founded Fianna Fáil, leading the government from 1959 to 73, made a speech on St. Patrick's Day in 1943, which was the 50th anniversary of the Gaelic Lead. And he stated, "As a vehicle of 3,000 years of our history, the language is for us precious beyond measure. To part with it would be to abandon a great part of ourselves, to lose the key of our past, to cut away our roots from the tree. With the language gone, we would never aspire to being more than half a nation." So here is a picture of the Gross Yield Memorial quarantine station, where they built a Celtic cross, and I visited there with Irish Heritage Quebec and the Irish ambassador to Canada in 2011. And this cross is really important because it shows that language is not neutral, and it shapes worldviews with a political economic narrative. Inscribed on the cross, you have English, French, and Gaelic. And in the English and French, you have a recognition of the famine, but it's very clear that in Irish, that this was not just any famine, it was artificially designed. And this difference in language preserves truth where politics often tries to erase it. So when we think about technology, we're democratizing, whether it's blockchain, Creative Commons licensing, AI translations, community media, they all play that same role in trying to preserve voices if they're silenced and being dependent on governance. So when we look at these case studies today, whether we're in Montreal, Dublin, Abidjan, language is not a tool. Notably, it is the propagation of information and the internet. It is the power and its resistance. and it is a possibility of healing. Language communities are more than heritage and an area of information communication technologies, the entire worldview encoded in words, practices, and relationships. Try and bring Martha on to, hopefully this is going to work. And it would be lovely if
Hello?
hello there. I have you on speakerphone, and the first slide from your presentation is up. Are you able to improvise like this?
Oh, okay. I am sorry. I got connection issues here.
Okay. Yeah, so you're live on the call right now, so if you're able to speak about the case study that you've written, I have your first slide that you sent me up.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Animon Lokobile. I am I've just defended a PhD on knowledge transmission through translation, intersemiotic translation, and the language I focused on was Douala in primary schools. So here right now, I'll be sharing some elements of the regulatory framework of knowledge transfer in Douala or in national languages in Cameroon. So Cameroon text on that sustain the transmission of knowledge in national languages. There are three texts. First of all, the law number 96 of January 1896, which states that Cameroon has a multilingual country needs to guarantee the promotion of bilingual throughout its territory and works in order to promote and protect national languages. The second text is the law 98/004 of April 14, which provides that national languages need to be taught in schools, national languages and cultures. There is also that text that is the Cameroon Primary Schools curriculum, which sets the objectives of learning or teaching in national languages and how it has to be done. So there are some interest or there are some focus. For instance, the speaking. It is important for lecturers to insist on speaking, on pronouncing, so that the students get the language. Because I have to say that Cameroonian national languages have tones, so it is important for someone to learn it to get the pronunciation. Now there is also something the lecturers try to do is to use it to teach some subjects. For instance, mathematics, history, and spoken languages, and even science and technologies. So there are timetables that provide teaching rates according to the class. Here you have, I don't know whether we can go to the second slide, please.
Yes, I've just changed.
I can. Okay, thank you. And here you have levels. Each level got 2 classes, and according to that, there is a rate that has to be respected. Now, here, for instance,
at the first level. Here is the SEAL, what we call here SEAL and CP, which can be the equivalent in South Africa of grade 1 and 2. And at this level, the timetables provide 80% rate of teaching in national languages and 20% teaching in French and English, which are the official languages of Cameroon. And how does it go? Here, for instance, for the history, let's take an example of history. At this level, the timetable provides that the teacher has to teach history in national languages. For instance, in Douala, what I must precise is that the teaching in national languages is within the ELAN project, which is teaching in national languages, which is a project in collaboration with La Francophonie. So the country chose something like 5 languages in order to experiment that project in those various schools according to the regions, because each region in the country has a dominant language. So I think the government used that to choose the various languages. So I studied on the Douala language, so that's why I can have more elements to share with you. So at the first level, the rates are 80%, 20%. It changes as the student or the pupil move forward with his studies. Here, the second level, there is 40% and 60%, which means what the teacher was teaching at 80% here, it will now reduce the rate of the national language. It will use more French than the national languages, and so on and so forth in the third level. Now, the project is shared, I must say, it's implemented, in 12 countries in the continent. So here are some of the inputs as far as the project is concerned here. I had the privilege in South Africa because I wanted also to see how things go there, because South Africa is similar to Cameroon in the sense that it's also a multilingual country. So there I observed a different state of the art. The schools I went in had students that were socialized in their national languages, but that were taught in English. It was a kind of amazing because given that they are more influenced by their national languages, each time the teacher was teaching in English, they were doing like between each other a kind of translanguaging, like in explaining to each other in their national language what they've just got from the teacher. So that's what I can say as far as the regulatory framework of knowledge transfer in national languages is concerned in Cameroon. Efforts are done to digitalize the languages because they appear more and more on social media. Some kits are also set for teaching in these languages. That's what I can say as far as my presentation is concerned. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope I will still try to connect myself. I hope it will work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. And this is recorded, so either way, you'll be able to join us. And I guess, Arvinder, did you want to go next? Because I do not see, or Daniel, did you want to go next? Because Kur, I think, has not joined us. Is that correct? I don't.
Hello?
And you don't have any slides.
Hello?
Okay. Daniel,
Mhm.
would you like to go next? Because I have your slides up here and teed up,
I can read, okay.
but I don't
Okay,
see Kur, so we're going to have to.
okay, thank you. Morning, everybody. Excuse me because of my English is not so well, but I'm going to read my speech. Okay. The question before us today is what role does local media play in revitalization and intergenerational transmission? Finds a concrete and inspiring answer in an initiative from Côte d'Ivoire in the Tongbé region, in the Denguen, village of Denguen.
Just give a moment.
Do you understand me? Do you understand me? Hello? Do you understand
Daniel
me?
said he couldn't hear, and
Hello? I can continue?
he was using the subtitles on the screen.
Hello?
Hey Daniel, est-ce que tu es connecté? Tu entends? Si tu peux faire la présentation là.
Oui, je suis en train de faire. Vous
Ok,
m'entendez? Et vous ne
d'accord.
m'entendez pas quand je parle?
Tu entends des voix?
Oui, je vois maintenant tout ça là. Maintenant, quand je
D'accord.
parle, vous ne m'entendez pas?
Uh,
J'ai commencé à parler. Est-ce que vous m'entendez?
I don't hear. Non, j'entends rien dans le.
Vous n'entendez rien. Sinon, j'ai ouvert mon micro pour parler.
Ah non, c'est là. Ok.
Vous êtes là? Merci.
Yeah. Wonderful. So the floor is yours, Daniel.
Hello. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Now, okay. I'm saying, morning, everybody. You're going to excuse me because of my English. So I'm going to read my speech. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the question today is what role do local media play in and intergenerational transmissions? Find a concrete and inspiring answer in an initiative from Côte d'Ivoire in Topi region, the village of Denguen. This initiative is a Denguen Digital Present Point community radio station, the brainchild of Professor Koneto Moma, president of the Virtual University of Côte d'Ivoire. For this vision, he sought to bring the university closer to rural communities and harness technology as a lever for economic, cultural, educational, and social development. So it is a vision for inclusive education. The Denguen project did not emerge by chance. Professor Koneto Moma recognized the university is to truly fruitful fulfill its mission. It cannot remain confined to large cities and the traditional campuses. It must reach rural communities, offering them access to education while also valuing the knowledge and cultures. This vision led to the establishment of the Dengue Digital Present Point, a center for digital access, which in 2024 expanded to include a community radio station, broadcasting both in FM and online. This innovation stands out because it places technology at the service of local culture and community development. Now, a radio station rooted in Yakuba culture. Yakuba is a language of the area of Dengue. What makes the Dengue community's radio unique is its deep cultural and linguistic riches. While brokers in French, it primarily use Yakuba, that majorly local language. Its program include local news and community updates, traditional tales, proverbs, and oral stories that preserve the wisdom of the elders, music, song, and dances that highlight cultural heritage, as well as educational segments on agriculture, health, the environment, and literacy. Now, revitalization and intergenerational transmission. The impact of dengue experience is already visible among young people. The Yakuba language is experiencing a revival. Many who once prioritized French are rediscovering the mother tongue and using it proudly in school and daily life. Now, among the elders, the radio has given them renewed importance. They contribute actively to programs, sharing the proverbs, stories, and life experiences. Their social role is strange and bonds with the younger generation are established. Okay, this experience that inspire policy innovation. Beyond the dengue, this initiative offer valuable lesson for public policy aimed at promoting local language through technology. It's highlight the need to strengthen the technology capacity of rural community radio station, train young people and teachers to produce media in local language, develop digital resources such as podcasts, dictionaries, and educational applications. Institutionalize community radio station as tool for alternative education and literacy, and build partnership between universities, local communities, and the diaspora to digitize and safeguard traditional knowledge. Okay, a forward-looking conclusion. The community radio station in Dengue demonstrates that it is indeed possible to reconcile modernity with tradition, digital knowledge with oral culture, and formal education with local knowledge. It shows us that local media are not merely instruments of information, they are agents of linguistic revitalization vehicles for intergenerational transmission, and powerful tools for social and educational inclusion. Thank you. And excuse me for my bad English. Thank you, everybody.
It was great. It's the first time I've heard you speak English, Danielle. That's very good. And I guess our vendor, if you, I know you don't have any slides, so I'll close down the share screen and you can go ahead and speak.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning. It's pretty early here in the West Coast of Canada. I will speak on three interlinked themes. The history of Punjabi as a stateless language, the question of data sovereignty in the digital era, and the broader challenge of growth agency and open source for low resource languages. Uh, so my first point is around the history and the memory. So Punjabi is spoken by more than 90 million people today across India, Pakistan, and the diaspora. It has a 1,000-year-old literary tradition, and it exists in two scripts. Shahmukhi, which is written in Perso-Arabic and is read right to left. Gurumukhi, standardized by Guru Angad of the Sikhs. In the 1500s, is read left to right. These scripts are more than a technical notation. They encode divergent political and religious imaginaries. History gives us both promise and warning. Some accounts claim that Punjab reached literacy levels of over 60% in the Maharaja Ranjit Singh in the earlier 19th century, allegedly through compulsory distribution of Punjabi primers like Qaida-e-Noor. In the history of indigenous education in the Punjab since annexation by G.W. Leitner, which was published in 1882, Leitner was tasked with reforming indigenous Punjabi education for colonial schools. Documents that prior to his reform, schools for girls existed in several locations across Punjab, including at least 18 formal schools in Lahore alone. Part of the reforms were buyback of all the primers and destruction of them, so much so that not a single copy of Qaida-e-Noor remains today. By the time of 1901 census under the British rule, that was roughly 20 years later, recorded male literacy in Punjab was only about 6% and female literacy close to zero. Whatever the exaggeration or the realities of the earlier periods, the lesson is clear that the language and the literacy are deeply tied to the systems of power and governance. And yet Punjabi has always carried more than literacy. It has carried a memory from Sufi poetry to Sikh scriptures to oral tradition in the villages. The languages have been the vessel of community identity. The memory is fragile, especially when caught between state projects that insist on one language, one religion, and one people, which is, you kind of see those projects on both sides of the divided Punjab. The second point I want to bring up was around the data sovereignty and digital fragility. In the 21st century, sovereignty is no longer just about land, it is also about data. For a stateless or marginalized language like Punjabi fractured across borders, the digital realm brings new vulnerabilities. Large language models, systems increasingly shaping our access to knowledge, are trained on data that overrepresent dominant languages. In India, for example, it's Hindi. In Pakistan, it's Urdu. Punjabi is underrepresented, and when it does appear, it is often diluted or distorted. Think of the Bollywood music, where the Punjabi lyrics are spliced with Hindi for a wider appeal. That the sound is global, but the language is hollowed out. This matters because algorithms learn from what exists. If the digital corpus is thin, biased, or externally owned, then Punjabi risks becoming defined not by its speakers, uh, but by the external infrastructures. Search engines, translation systems, and generative AI models replicate these distortions at scale. The question then is urgent. How does a language without state participate in shaping its digital future? Who owns the corpora, the tokenizers, the stemmers, the dictionaries that define the digital representation? If these are built without community control, when Punjabi sovereignty will remain externalized, just as its political agency was once contained under a colonial empire. The last point that I want to bring up is around growth agency and open source. That leads us to growth and agency. Economists measure growth in GDP, but for language, growth is not measured in consumption. It is measured in agency, the ability to define, preserve, and transmit knowledge on one's own terms. Open source represents both promise and peril. On one hand, it allows communities to build and share tools freely. On the other hand, it exposes smaller languages to appropriation by dominant ones. Once bias models are absorbed into open source ecosystem, distortion becomes permanent. Recently, for example, a generative system produced sacred Sikh words of Gurbani in trivialized LLM outputs, a practice strictly forbidden and condemned by humans, a stark reminder of what happens when minority languages are subsumed without safeguards by machines run by large corporations using indigenous resources without accountability to them. And the LLM here I was mentioning was Gemini. Yet Punjabi is not without its assets. It has a rich tradition and a wide global base of speakers and a vibrant diasporic community. During the farmers' protest, a couple of years ago, Punjabi was not just a local medium of dissent. It became a global language of sustainability, expression of indigenous aspirations that resonated worldwide. Here, language was not just a relic of identity; it was living tool of a political imagination. The path forward is not consumption but liberation. Building multilingual corpora, creating high quality dictionaries, investing in tokenizers and stemmers, and insisting on community ownership and not corporate guardianship of the data infrastructures. This is this is the work that ensures that low resource languages do not remain invisible in the digital future. In closing, the Punjabi case is not just about one language. It is a warning and an opportunity for all lower source languages and stateless languages. The battle for sovereignty today is not fought with armies. It is fought with data sets, algorithms, and representations. If we lose the right to be present in the digital infrastructures, we risk losing the right to define ourselves. Languages carry not just words, but worlds. To preserve them is to preserve the memory and the agency of the entire peoples. Thank you.